What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Gsluke here with our round 3 stream for the Sony Open. Going to break down what you need to know for Showdown and for prize picks and have some fun along the way. So if you have any questions, anything you want a deep dive on, do not be shy at all to go ahead and throw those questions down into chat. And I can see a few of you are already down there. What's going on, Parker? Hopefully you're having a great Saturday morning. And of course, Nick Mars, with all of the fire comments. Could we not mention that guy with the initials JS today? I mean, unfortunate. You guys know I'm the biggest Jordan Spieth fan, like in human history. But that fade yesterday for Showdown ended up working out quite nicely. So, yeah, we won't talk about him too much longer. I mean, to go full Keegan, go from first round leader to missing the cut is embarrassing, particularly when it's one of my favorite players. But kind of had that feeling that might end up happening. So unfortunate, but yeah, we'll stop talking about Voldemort. That's what we'll call good old JS from here on out. So let's hop into this course. We'll get into the live chat a little bit later on, all of your questions, that sort of fun stuff. But let's take a look at this golf course, which yesterday played pretty much like we expected here. We knew it was going to be a little bit easier with the lower winds. We knew that the setup in terms of pin locations looked a little bit more gettable on those par fives, also on that drivable par four. And all of that was evident. Hole number 10 went from right around a neutral hole in terms of score to average to right around a third of a stroke under. So there was a huge increase in the amount of scoring there. Hole 9, the par 5, played well under par like you saw for round 1. And same thing with hole number 18. So when you take a look at the scoring average, you might think that there were a lot more birdies made in round 2 than what we saw in round 1. And that wasn't necessarily the case. When you look at the field average, in round 1, the average birdies are better in the field was 3.8, yet in round 2 was only 3.66. So despite the birdie production going down, the scores got a little bit easier. And I think a lot of that has to do with the pin locations and, of course, how they were tucking some of those par fours. Because holes 3 through 5, you can see played under par. There's a par 3 there, a few par fours. Yesterday, those played right around neutral, if not over par. And then on the back 9, holes like 12, 14 played a lot easier today than it did there on Thursday. All of that made a huge difference with the scoring. In terms of your ceiling performances, outside of Nick Hardy, it looked really similar to the first day, right? -6. You had a few guys do that. Montgomery, Spieth in round 1. A few other guys, I believe Hayden Buckley might have, he shot -6 today, got to -9. You're going to see -5, -6 leading pretty much every single round. And then you're going to get those 1 or 2 players that shoot 7 to 8 under par. So that wasn't so much surprising. And we're pretty much looking at the same conditions today. So when we take a look at the weather report, low winds, pretty much no matter what source you're looking at. In the morning, we have between 2 and 5 miles an hour winds. And then in the afternoon, there's actually a point where there's going to be literally 0 miles an hour of winds. Now, I've never seen that on a forecast before. But when we head over here to Willy weather, it kind of backs it up. In the morning, they only have 3.4 miles an hour of winds. And then in the afternoon, it goes down to 1.1 mile an hour, which I've never seen before. I mean, guys, typically it's going to be at least like 3 to 5 miles an hour. That's like the minimum that a lot of these sites are going with. It looks like literally today there's not going to be a breath of wind. So that's going to just add to the scoring. You're probably going to expect to see a lot of guys out there potentially getting to that 5, 6 under par mark. And like I said, you're going to see a few guys potentially get to 7, 8 under par, especially when you consider that there's moving day pins out there. The greens should be relatively risk reward heavy, at least with the pin locations. A lot of times a moving day, they're going to put pins in bowls, where if you end up hitting the bowl, you're going to have a really good birdie look. But if you miss the bowl, you're going to have a really tricky up and down. A lot of times on the par fives, they'll put them in the back just to add to that risk reward aspect. I expect to see a lot of those sort of themes here for a Saturday round. Let's catch up on chat, see what's going on down there. We have a Ant down there with the cringe face. Not sure what that's all about. What's going on to Peach? Maybe it's about Jordan Spieth. It makes sense. That was embarrassing. Hey, I didn't end up playing Jordan Spieth this week. So I was saying shut up to Nick yesterday because he kept mentioning Spieth on stream. He didn't end up making my final poll last second. Like within the last 5 minutes of me uploading lineups, I had to get enough leverage on my guys up top, and I couldn't finagle my optimizer to allow in enough Hideki to get enough of Sanjay M, who ended up missing the cut, right? I wanted 50% Sanjay M. So he ended up coming out of my player pool. And when he was -6, when he was leading after the first day, it was like the biggest nut punch ever. So that's why I was telling Nick to shut up on stream, not to tell people about it, because I felt like a little Dumbo out there. And he goes out there and misses the cut. So We lucked out on that end. I'll just say that much, okay? DePeach says, morning, guys. What's going on? Nick says, pricing is soft around 3. How do you not leave money on the table? Yeah, exactly. So we're going to get into the strategy here in a second. The pricing is incredibly soft. You can essentially play whoever you want, which means that no one's going to go into the 6K range. I kind of mentioned it on the Patreon last night on that little side note, but if you go into even the top end of the 6K range, you're going to be getting essentially unowned players that are not that much worse than the guys that everyone is taking in the bottom of that 7K range. So yeah, this is a game theory slate. I would recommend leaving salary on the table, because if you do, you're almost automatically going to be unique. And the players in that top of the 6K range are literally the same sort of guys that you're playing in the bottom of that 7K range. So I don't think we need to overthink it. Damn, the surfers are going to be pissed. Yeah, it's going to be horrible out there in terms of surfing. In terms of playing conditions, I will expect it to be low scoring. The one thing I'll say, guys, and I've considered this, especially on the prop side. So when we get to prize picks a little bit later, this is going to be especially important. It's getting firm and fast out there. It's extremely dry. There's no precipitation on any of the forecasts, at least for the next day and a half. On Sunday afternoon, it might rain, but that's not going to affect play today. You're looking at a course that's getting baked out. The fairways are extremely hard to hit. I mean, that's been the case since Thursday, but as it gets even firmer, they're getting even harder to hit those fairways. The greens are getting a little bit crunchy, and I don't know, unless you're hitting the perfect shot and executing it to 5-6 feet, I think you're going to see a lot of bogeys today. So even though there will be moving day pins, there's not going to be a lot of wind out there. I don't know if we're going to see a 2 under par average. I could see it being 1.2, 1.5 under par. The main reason for that is just the increased quality of player. Now that a lot of those outliers, people that were missing the cut are, out of the player pool now. But I don't know if we're going to see that 2 under par average like we're used to seeing at this course. And the reason why I say that, it's not just the weather side. The weather's perfect, right? Obviously, that's conducive to low scores. It's the long rough that's this year. I mean, it's almost an inch longer, that rough out there. And you're also dealing with those firm and fast conditions. I mean, that's normally what we see at major championships, right? That's how they make those courses more difficult. A lot of people, prize picks included, and that's why I want to mention this so much right now, they're expecting it to get significantly easier today. And typically that happens on moving day. It gets a little bit easier, but those firm and fast conditions might make up for it. So yeah, when we get into the prize picks later, you'll see that I'm actually a little bit more bullish on the fades today than I am the supportive stances, because it seems like prize picks has maybe overreacted just a little bit when it comes to that. Scott says, since day one hasn't finished yet, do you think there's an advantage on DK since they have all the guys listed? Yeah, so a few people will play guys that missed the cut. You see that every time the situation pops up, but it's usually not all that significant. The higher dollar contest you're in, if you're in a single entry or a $50 to $100 single entry plus, you're not going to get anybody that does that, right? Those sort of players are educated. They're going to be on top of who actually made the cut line. But if you're playing in the large field GPP or some of the smaller dollar stuff, like the 50-cent GPP, where you can put in 150 lineups, the $10 20 max, that sort of thing, there's going to be a ton of people that just they don't know any better, and they end up playing guys that miss the cut. So it's not enough to create an edge. Of course, there's the rake out there that you have to overtake to try and create an edge on DFS. But it helps. There might be a few percent of people that go out there and end up playing those guys. DePeach says, agree. I have money left on virtually all lineups. Yeah, if you leave just $300 to $500, it's the way to go. It's real easy there. Mr. Greg says, Merritt is your favorite play today. I'm okay with him. He was about Jordan. I figured he was about Jordan. I can't believe I lucked out on that. I can't. And honestly, I was so embarrassed that I didn't play him, that I completely outsmarted myself, galaxy brained myself there on a Thursday morning, because it was literally at 11:50 that I took him out of the player pool. And now I feel like an absolute fucking genius, but that was by accident. That's all I can say. And yeah, I can't wait for the PP either. We have a lot of bumps that ended up happening, but there's still a few props on there that I do like. Jason said, any props you like since prize picks bumped all the Patreon? Not all of them. There's a few of them on there, Jason. But yeah, we're going to talk about them later. When we get to the prize picks board, I'm going to go over a few of those picks. Let's get into the showdown slate so we can get into prize picks a little bit later. So let me share my screen. We'll bring up the DFS projections, and let's get through this. So let's start off with the general strategy. So Nick kind of hit the nail on the head earlier. Look at the pricing, okay? Our most expensive player is $9,700. And I don't even like Brian Harman. I'm not even playing Brian Harman today, which you can play him if you want to, whatever, right? It's your own prerogative out there. He's your second highest owned player on the slate. That's the reason why I don't love him. But he's $9,700. So even if you were starting lineups with Brian Harman, that's a solid $800, $900 cheaper than we're used to starting a player pool. And the real heavy hitters here, like I love a Hideki. Taylor Montgomery is going to be mega chalk. He's only $9,400. If you're starting a lineup at $9,400, you can essentially play whoever the heck you want, right? I mean, you could start a lineup with Corey Connors. You could live in this 9K range, take a Tom Hoagie, KH Lee, add in another one of these 8K guys. And for your last two spots, you're in the top to middle of the 7K range, right? It's not like you're dipping too far on terms of your pricing board. You don't have to go down and take some of those super cheap 6K options, 6K flyers that we're typically doing on Showdown, right? We usually want to go after those 6K options because it's such a volatile format, right? That's where you get your leverage. That's how we can spend up for an extra stud or two. It's kind of the opposite this time around, where everyone's going to be so balanced today with their builds. They want to get 6 golfers that they feel really good about. I'll just challenge you and I'll push back a little bit and say, it's Showdown, guys. It's golf. It's the most random sport out there. Do you really think that your 6 picks in the 8K range are really that safe? Because they aren't, okay? I can tell you that. For as much as you may like some of those 8, 9K golfers, they're not nearly the quote-unquote locks that you think they are, right? And if you've been playing DFS, you've probably realized that at this point. So we have to think about the game theory side. The way to win this slate, particularly if you're in a large field GPP, is sure, take a few guys up top that you like. That's fine, right? You want to spend most of your salary. But instead of living in the bottom of the 7K range, you can see I have a whole huge dead zone here when it comes to my player pool. Why not just go a little bit cheaper? Go to somebody like an Adam Schenk, who's 1% owned. Let's go down here to Kevin, Kita Nakajima, 3% owned. You go down here to a Davis Thompson, a Cole Hammer. You go to a Adam Long if you wanted to. All of them are between 2 and 3% owned. Now, I'll say with Davis Thompson, if he 4 putts, he won't make the cut. So we have to keep an eye on that, I suppose. We're only going to have like 2 minutes to react to that, but it's highly unlikely that Davis Thompson ends up missing the cut. So I actually think that's going to keep his ownership down a little bit. People won't want to play him just in case he ends up missing the cut. So maybe he's a good leverage play, but I personally, he made my life really difficult last night. Anytime they don't finish the round, all of those stats that import from the databases that I'm importing from don't update. Right. And because there's still a player out there on the course, they won't give me the summary stats from the day, like scoring average, GAR, fairway, and regulation average. So I had to calculate all that by hand. So I have a little bit of a personal vendetta against Davis Thompson, but the idea is these 6K options are all super cheap. And it's not like I'm down here in like the $6,500 range, right? I'm not playing anybody down there. Just by simply going down to a Hammer, going down to this Nakajima, 3%, or lower owned plays like a Ryan Palmer, Joseph Bramlett, that gives me all the leverage I need. So if I really wanted to play a Taylor Montgomery, if I really wanted to play a Brian Harman and they were chalky, I could more than get away with it here. I'm going to be leaving salary on the table. I'm going to have plays that are going to be owned in sub 3% of lineups. So it's not really going to be an issue. So up top, it's not that I'm fading these guys because they're just chalky. A lot of the time, it's just that I don't like the plays. Like Taylor Montgomery is playing well above his head with the putter. He's putting his absolute ass off, but he only hit 60% of greens today, or just say yesterday there for Friday's round. So I don't know if that's really sustainable, even with his hot putter. And then somebody like Brian Harman, he had an ego out there, but outside of that, looked sloppy for most of his rounds. So those sort of plays are just fades based on their playing style, maybe their form coming into this round. But don't be afraid to play chalk. As long as you're playing some of those top of the 6K options, you're not going to have any issues with being unique. I mean, look at this, guys. The middle of the 7K range has guys that are between 15 and 12% owned. Like you have a 15% owned Ben Griffin, an 11% owned nearly Steven Yeager. You have a 12% owned SH Kim and David Lipsky, an 11% owned Austin Eckert, right? The casuals are just going to flock to these players that are higher owned, that are quote unquote safer than some of the other picks, and they're at the top of the leaderboard. Couple things to push back on that. One, they're not safe. We already talked about that. But second of all, they're de-incentivized to go out there and play aggressively. If you're towards the top of the leaderboard, someone like 300-400 under par today is going to keep yourself in contention, if not move yourself up the leaderboard. Whereas the guys like a Kurt Kitayama, they're at -2. The guys that are, at a -3-4 that just made the cut by a stroke or two need to go out there and put the, foot down to the pedal. They need to absolutely go out there, floor it, try and shoot someone like 6 to 7 under par. And a majority of the guys towards the top of the board are here in the 7K range. So if you just fade this, there's a few guys I'm taking, like a Kazire, right? He's only 6% owned. A Will Gordon's only 9.3. So there are a few options that I'm still playing. But But these chalky players in the 7K range, it's just a real easy way to get leverage to the field. And there's a reason why they're 7K range golfers. I'll remind you of that as well. You may think that they're, so much better plays than these guys down here in the 6K range or the bottom end of the 7K range. I'll just tell you that's not really the case. They're maybe slightly better plays. There's a reason why they're more expensive. There's a reason why they're getting a little bit more ownership. But anytime I've got that single round sample size, count me in. I'm going to be taking those pivots. A few other chalky plays to point out. We've got Chris Kirk. He's 21.5% owned. He's your leader, so he's always going to be a little bit more chalky than he should be. We have JT Poston's getting some ownership. McNeely, JJ Spawn is extremely chalky because he's cheap and they're at -10 there in second place. So all of these sort of players, you get to probably told before he got on the stream that I was going to be fading them. That shouldn't be a surprise. Let's talk through a few of the guys that I do like. So Hideki, he was extremely shaky the first 2 rounds, but he still made the cut. That shows you his floor. I mean, he went out there, essentially played to his floor and still made the cut. I like the upside. He's low owned enough, 27% in round 3 showdown is actually exceptionally low ownership for somebody of his quality. I mean, if Hideki was in contention, guys, it'd be 40% owned. He'd be your highest owned player on the slate by far, because at this point, after Spieth, Tom Kim, and Sungjae were all cut, he's by far your best player. I mean, Brian Harman's a lot worse player than Hideki. He might be a little bit more consistent, but we know Hideki has a lot more upside. Montgomery's still that up-and-coming star. He's really your only elite superstar level player left in the field. So the fact that we're getting them at 27%, it's actually a little bit of a bargain. I still like Corey Connors. The guy can't putt for his life this week. So in the past, he had gained a bunch of strokes around Waialae Country Club with the flat stick. He lost strokes putting in round 1, lost strokes putting yesterday, missed a 5.5 footer, mixed like a 6 foot, like 9-inch putt on hole number 7 yesterday. So he still shot -4. Had one of the better rounds of the day, but has a lot of room for improvement. If he can just go out there and be a neutral putter, you're probably looking at something like 5 under par for Corey Connors, let alone if he gains, which he historically has done on these greens, which could be an absolutely nuclear round. So I still love Corey Connors. He's been a little just average to this point, kind of middling, hasn't done anything crazy, but I do think he has a lot of upside going forward. And see what's going on. Nick says, every one of your lineups either had Spieth or Im. Yeah, that's not ideal. I know you play aggressively though, so that's going to happen to you a little bit more often than most other players. I still got my Hideki lineups and my Corey Connors lineups going. The only ones I have that are 6 or 6s are ones that start with Hideki, which, I mean, he's probably dead. He looked like he was hurt yesterday. Or Corey Connors. So Corey Connors, I have a lot riding on him this week. DePete says, any thoughts on Lipsky? I just think that you're missing the train on him, right? Like if you were going to play Lipsky, it was for rounds 1 and 2 for 4-round contest. At this point, he's getting the ownership. He's towards the top of the board. I mean, if you really want to eat the chalk on a 7K option, you can, but I usually prefer not to. I would rather take my chances in that range, take some of the pivots because they're lower tier players for a reason. He said, wouldn't the best strategy be to play the usual strategy as if there were 10K golfers? I don't really understand what you mean by that. You're going to have to elaborate, to Peach, but no, I don't. Because if you do, you're spending all of your salary. You're playing it very balanced, just starting at the top of the board, and you're going to end up duplicating yourself with a ton of people. So no, I don't think so, to Peach. I would say that this sort of slate, you absolutely should be spending down, trying to get leverage plays, because if you were to just stay in the middle of the 7K range, you're going to be taking all these 10, 15% owned players. Whereas you spend on $400, you're getting guys that are 10, sometimes just 5 times less owned. That's the strategy I'd be going with. You have a lineup out there with $4,400 left. So yeah, that makes sense to me. Pure Carnage, I don't know about that. It's still pretty fast. They got it to 11 under par. But yeah, the afternoon yesterday when it got firm and fast out there, I enjoyed watching that, especially because it didn't have many golfers out there playing. That was pretty fun. Hopefully the firm and fast conditions continue. Nick says, I would have loved if Brian Stewart was the only guy left to finish. Don't you even put that curse on me out there, Nick. Don't even say that. I don't know if you saw the player poll, Nick, but I'm pretty sure Brian Stewart's in the player poll. Let's double check on that. Oh no, he's not. Look at that. The curse stays out there. Maybe for Sunday Showdown, if we get ourselves a little bit lower owned, you can see he's still 4% owned. He's like one of the higher owned plays in this range here. I might be on Ryan Stewart. We'll have to see. It feels like when I play Ryan Stewart, he ends up playing pretty well. So hopefully we can time him up there. But yeah, I do not like the guy. You're damn right. T Monty has like the hottest putter on earth. Yeah. I mean, what's his shots gained number to this point? Let's bring it up. His shots gained number has to be ridiculous. Let's see. T Monty, he's in second place. We know that. I know he's gained a shit ton with the putter. He's gained 5.4 strokes putting through the first 2 rounds. It's unsustainable. I know he's a great putter, but he's going to cool off a little bit. You'd have to think. Seaman says, "Do you think Hoagie has run out of gas with all of his travels?" Could be. I haven't really kept too close an eye on him. I know in round 1 he made 6 birdies, but was really sloppy with the bogey, so he only ended up shooting 2 under par. And then yesterday, he had 2 bogeys and 2 birdies. So it was an extremely uneventful round. I wouldn't count him out, Steven. You know, maybe he had a flat day yesterday. Maybe he woke up a little bit low energy. That's more than possible given all that travel. But give him a few days to acclimate himself. I think he could snap out of it. So he's there at -2. He's way behind the pack. I actually tend to like Tom Hoagie for this sort of round. And what's his price tag there? I know he's cheaper now. He's $9,100, only 18.9% owned. I tend to like that sort of play. Just hoping that he comes back. Obviously, he could still be fatigued, go out there, have another poor round. But now we're getting a lower priced Hoagie and a lower owned Hoagie, which is something I like. Patrick says he heard Decky's dealing with a neck injury. Yeah, I saw that. He was actually on the coverage yesterday. They were showing him like grabbing his neck. He was rubbing it. He was trying to get himself loose. He finished the round and finished it -1 or -2 his last 6 or 7 holes. So he played well to end his round. We'll have to see. I think if he withdraws, that wouldn't surprise me all that much. But he looked fine to me as well. So I expect him to play, but like, I don't know, 20, 30% chance he probably withdraws. Wouldn't surprise me if it ends up happening, but I'm not going to assume that that's happening. Thanks. You felt like you were chasing going down into the lower range. Yeah, you want to go down into that lower. I see what you're saying. So you're saying taking the players in the 6K range like you would have if they were 10K golfers. Yes, 100%. No, you're good. And yeah, I'm still sipping on my coffee here too. We're only like a third of a way into it. So I haven't truly had my coffee either. Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, that's how I would handle it, right? Is like taking the same sort of range of players you would take normally, because I mean, let's just look at the pricing board here, guys. If all of these 9 and 8K options are going to be popular, this is why this zone right here is just way overutilized. I mean, what your lowest owned player here is 8%, and that's Kurt Kitayama. I mean, your average ownership in this range is like 10, 12%, here from $8,600 down to $7,700. I mean, typically we have at least a few pivot plays, right? A few guys we can get to at low ownership, and that unfortunately is not the case for the slate. So yeah, you're spot on with that. Sorry, I didn't understand your question there. Like I said, it's early for me too. Patrick says, I meant the number top players that missed the cut. Yeah. I mean, what? Jordan Spieth, 18% owned. You had like 25% owned Sunjay M. Rip. I was a part of that for sure. And then Tom Kim, 30% owned chalk. Now, I didn't play him, right? I faded him this week, but I didn't think he was going to miss the cut. So yeah, that is carnage. You're right. Anthony says, we keep saying it's unsustainable, but he keeps going after it. Wesley Bryan-esque. Dude sleeps, eats, and showers with his flat stick with T Monty. Yeah, so the issue with him is like he has had rounds where he hasn't gone out there and had like 2 strokes putting to the field. The issue is the other parts of his game. Like he's had rounds where he's just absolutely bled off the tee, right? Lost 2-3 strokes. Lost 2-3 strokes on approach. So if he's not gaining those 2 strokes with the flat stick, which he's not going to do that every round, right? He's going to have rounds where it's like half a stroke, maybe a stroke and a half gain to the field. Those ball striking stats can put him into the negative because he's not the best from tee to green. So I'm kind of there with you, Anthony. I think that he's probably the best putter on tour, and I could say that even as a rookie. But I don't know if he's invincible when it comes to the flat stick. I'll say that much because it is tee to green game, especially at like the Shriners round 1 comes to mind. He had a really poor round there. A lot of that was due to the driver, but when his poor rounds are memorable, you know he's an absolute stud. Right? Like when I can remember off the top of my head, like that one time that Taylor Montgomery had a bad round, you know who you're talking about, right? A kid that's an absolute phenom out there. So we talked about the top end range. We talked about Corey Connors. Let's quickly go through some of the top plays. I like Lee. He could not buy a putt for his life yesterday through 15 holes. He had only missed 1 green. I believe missed hole number 15. So he had 2 green regulation misses out of his 18 holes. But still got it to 3 under par. So his ball striking, his tree to green play has been there through the first 2 days. Lost 2 strokes putting in day 1, was a little bit better in day 2 because he made a few 30-foot putts. Just unfortunately couldn't make any of the 6 to 8 footers. I took him for his over 4.5 birdies on Prize Picks, and he made 4, yet he missed like 3 or 4 of those like gimme putts for birdie. So just unfortunate. I was pretty pissed off at him, but he has the potential to go low, right? You just got to convert on those opportunities. I like Cameron Davis. I like Adam Scott, both Aussies. You're looking at relatively low ownership on both. 11% on Adam Scott, 15% on a Cam Davis. Cam Davis, we know, is an extremely aggressive player, capable of taking it to 8, 9 under par. The fact that he's at -4 is trailing by a bunch means that he has to be aggressive to go out there and make up ground. And I think that he's got the firepower to do so. Adam Scott, again, with that momentum that he was able to muster the last 3 holes on Thursday, looked great yesterday, was able to make 6 birdies on the round, move himself up into the top 25. And now that he's trending even more in the right direction, I'm going to continue to ride that. Adam Scott was one of my favorite plays going into the week. He's trending in the right direction. And while he's a volatile play, the ball striking, and by the way, I found this funny too. He showed up 18 minutes before his tee time. He got onto the range with only 18 minutes to warm up. And for his first 8, 9 holes, I don't think he missed a shot. He was absolutely flawless out there. So maybe he needs to show up 15 minutes before his tee time again. Go out there, just free will it like he did here for Friday, because it looked beautiful out there. He was back to that silky smooth Adam Scott swing that we just love to see. Denny McCarthy, he's like one of the higher owned plays I'm willing to get to. Like him and Cameron Davis, 13 to 15% is, not a low pivot by any means, but they're not chalk for a showdown slate. There's less players in the pool. Your average ownership's a lot higher than what you have for your 4-round contests. And at a track where putting is going to be a premium, I'm always going to be looking for Denny McCarthy. He's -7. I think he's one of the better players in this field too. Like if you're just talking about pure talent level, Denny McCarthy's a lot better than a JJ Spawn, a Cage Lee. He's up there in the just below, I'd say like a Corey Connors, Russell Henley sort of tier here on the PGA Tour. So he could be a solid $1,000 more expensive, and I think is going to make a run over the weekend. So I'm willing to take him at even a relatively high ownership mark. Harris English, he's starting to look a lot better. We mentioned that going into the week. That has remained the case through the first 2 rounds. The ball striking has been a little bit inconsistent. He had a bunch of fairways in round 1. He had a bunch of greens in round 1. Yesterday was a little bit less consistent. Only ended up hitting 13 greens, I believe 7 fairways out of the 14. So he's got to keep the ball striking on pat, but the putter's back for Harris English. When he's his best, he's one of the best putters on the PGA Tour, particularly from that 15 to 20 foot range. And then on Bermuda grass, it's like a cheat code for Harris English. So hopefully the ball striking can come around, but he's making a bunch of birdies with that putter, which is always great for the showdown format. Andrew Putnam loves the greens at Waialae. I'm taking him at 7,800. Kurt Kitayama, I'll be riding him all weekend. He's been posting elite level birdie production. Like we mentioned yesterday, just has to clean it up when it comes to the bogeys. And yesterday missed a ton of putts. In fact, let's bring up his shots gained record because I know it's not pretty. But Kitayama was just putting himself in position time after time again. And in terms of his shots gained putting, let's see. In round 2, Kurt Kitayama lost. Well, actually, let's just put it to round 2. He lost 1.1 strokes putting. In round 1, he lost 1.2 strokes putting. So, consistently going out there and leaking strokes on the greens. But we're on Bermuda, right? That's where Kurt Kitayama typically does his best work. In fact, for his career, he's a gainer on the Bermuda surface. So kind of like a Corey Connors, at some point, we would expect that putter to come along. And if it does, based on the tee to green play that we've seen, you're probably looking at a really low round for Kurt when that happens. So 8% owned, count me in for sure. Grayson Sigg hardly made the cut by his skin of his teeth. He was -3 going into 18, which is a par 5 for anybody not familiar. And all he had to do was par that hole, and he would guarantee himself through the cut line. He hit his ball right up next to the green, had to take relief from one of the stands there, and actually took relief at probably the worst possible spot. He had to take relief from just behind a bunker, and he was short-sided to that pin on the front left of 18. And what did he do? Of course, he chunks it, like all of us hacks out there would have, into the bunker. And then he doesn't get up and down out of the bunker and ends up bogeying the easiest hole on the golf course. And like I said, hardly made the cut by the skin of his teeth. I mean, just that was one of the bigger chokes that I've seen. So yeah, good thing that the cut was -2, or is going to be -2 when they end up finishing the round. because Grayson Sig almost pissed me off big time. Matt Kuchar, I'm getting there. He loves himself a short course. He's accurate off the tee, loves himself on Bermuda grass. So I'll be getting there at 9%. Pat Gazire, another Bermuda specialist. Going into the week, the main reason we played him was because of that familiarity on Bermuda, and has played decent to this point. Not great, but he's an aggressive player that can go to that ceiling performance. Will Gordon, another hyper-aggressive player. And you're looking at players that have gone over 5 stroke shots gained in a single round for this season. Nobody has more rounds over 5 strokes gained in a round than Will Gordon does. And a lot of those come in round 1. So if you're looking for like a first-round leader sort of bet, Will Gordon should almost always be on your radar for that. So I like him there at 9.3%. Brendan Steele, another good ball striker. He's just got to get the putting working. And another guy who, yet again, on Bermuda is significantly better than his baseline. You can see gains 0.61 more strokes on Bermuda than he does on any other surface. So that's all going to be very helpful for Steele. Let's catch up with chat, see what's going on. We got prize picks. Yeah, we'll be there after we go through the bottom end of the pool here. And Andrew Leone says, Keegan Bradley and Tom Kim are slapdicks. I love the slapdick. Hey, I haven't used that term in a long ass time. Thank you for bringing that back up. And Keegan Bradley and Tom Kim. Yeah, Tom Kim, right? Slapdick chalk, right? 30%. Anybody that got leverage on that, like, I feel bad for you. Like, I understand the play. The kid's an absolute stud. I feel bad for you because he had to play like 65, 70% to get leverage. And that was why I didn't play him, right? Like, that's what I mentioned going into the week. So I feel bad for anybody that played him. Keegan Bradley, he's just got to figure out the skinny thing. He looks like he's 50 pounds lighter than he was before. He claims that he's not ever since he won the Zozo. He claims he's the same weight as he was when he won that tournament over there in Japan. And I just don't buy it. He doesn't look the same. I watched the tape the other day from the Zozo, and he looks like he's a solid 40 pounds heavier. So maybe he just has to get used to not being a chunky boy anymore. I'm sure it's quite an adjustment. I can't relate, to be quite honest with you. I'm not very thin like the Keegan Bradley right now. David Lipsky, I know somebody asked about him before. The only issue I have about him is the 12% ownership number. Same thing with SH Kim. They're just not twice as likely as a Steele to succeed, or 3 times as likely as a Russell Knox, or 6 times as likely as a Joseph Bramlett to succeed. So it's just a pure ownership, pure game theory play for me. I have Lipsky in 4-round contests too. So it's kind of, the life hedge. Kind of like self-hedging myself right there. I don't feel a need to try and force him into the player pool when I have that other exposure. Let's move down into this bottom end of the 7, top end of the 6K range. And this is where you're getting your leverage. I touched on it before. This is where your players are going to be a lot lower owned than they should be. Bramlett, another one of those players who historically was great on the Waialae Country Club greens, but to this point has not been able to get it done. He lost a bunch of strokes putting in round 1. Yesterday was right around a neutral. So you're hoping that you get that pop performance, but he's only 1.6% owned. Ryan Palmer has won at this course before. To this point, let's look at good old Ryan Palmer's stats, because I don't know these ones off the top of my head, but I would imagine that Ryan Palmer has quite a lot of room for improvement. But let's go ahead and confirm that. He loves the greens at Waialae, so we know that he probably should be gaining on the greens, but to this point is a neutral putter, is neutral on approach, and is gaining a bunch off the tee, which for Ryan Palmer, I think a lot of us would probably be surprised by. He's definitely not the most stout off the tee player on tour. He's more known for that iron play and that putting. So now that we've got him on Waialae, a course where he knows these greens, like I said, better than pretty much anybody else in the field, we just got to get that approach play to come along, right? If he can go out there, gain someone like a stroke to the field with the irons, rather than being right around a neutral, you're looking at a decent round for a $7,100 golfer. And he's only 3% owned as well. So I like all of that, all of reasons to play Ryan Palmer. Adam Schenk, one of the higher birdie percentage players that we have on all the PGA Tour. Always like him when he's low owned in a showdown format. You have Kita Nakajima I'm playing. So Kita, he played well a few weeks ago in the fall swing, where he had like a top 5 finish, was leader after 3 rounds at one point. The kid's an absolute stud, likes Bermuda grass, and no one wants to play him because they're not familiar with his game, right? He's relatively new to the scene. He's had 1 or 2 events where he's made the cut, kind of done something with it. But even with that, a lot of the casuals or people that weren't playing in the fall swing, just don't even know who the guy is. Like, I've seen people on Twitter, somebody actually playing on Prize Picks, I'm not going to call him out by name, is playing a birdie better matchup against Nakajima, and like their reasoning was like, oh, I don't even know who this guy is. Like, obviously we got to take the over and birdie a better matchup versus him. Well, Nakajima is your former world number one amateur, which Tiger Woods has been that. Almost, like a Jordan Spieth, JT, all of these sort of players were world number one when it comes to your amateur at some point. So I wouldn't just brush him off as a nobody. Keita Nakajima, he's a potential superstar someday in our game. Literally on the PGA Tour, might be like a top 20 player at some point. He has that sort of potential. Cole Hammer, though, is my favorite showdown play on the slate. So a few reasons for this. Cole Hammer, first of all, had a horrible first round this event, but turned it around, looked like an absolute stud yesterday. And at the RSM Classic, I got to see a lot of Cole Hammer in person. That kid's an absolute gamer. We've been hearing about this kid since he's 14. So the fact that he's finally coming around is great to see. It's, helps all those golf hardos that were telling us he was going to be a stud for so long. But seeing him in person at the RSM, completely sold me on him. His ball striking, especially his iron play, is unbelievable. He's not long off the tee, though. That's the one thing that really holds him back, is he's not long and he's not accurate off the tee. We get him at a golf course now where driver's pretty much taken out of your hands. You don't have to hit driver. You can hit a lot of 3-woods around there. And to this point, I think that's what has made him successful. So when we take a look at his stats, just to give you the full picture, he's 3 under to this point. And let's find Cole Hammer here. From the shots gained perspective, he gets a lot of it done with the putter, which isn't surprising. He's number 26 in the field when it comes to shots gained putting, but he's gaining 1.8 strokes off the tee. And that's the real key. Is at the RSM Classic, guys, he was keeping himself in play and just relying on the putter. He's an electric putter. We know that. Electric short game player. And the irons to this point have actually been a loser for Hammer. So if he can continue to do his thing off the tee and with the putter, that's kind of what he's known for, and just turn those irons around, you're looking at a nuclear score for Cole Hammer. He's got the sort of game, because that putter is so stout and the off the tee can be stout from time to time, at least in terms of your accuracy, to nuke golf courses. You saw it at the RSM Classic. I believe he shot 9 under par that one day, a 61 around the Seaside course. And it's a similar kind of course here. So I like him at 2.4%. And Adam Long, another accurate player off the tee, a little bit better in terms of your modeling. You can see he's number 19 in the field when it comes to your Waialae Country Club fit. Loves Bermuda grass. To this point, let's take a look at his stats too. He's been going way under the radar. He hardly made the cut by the skin of his teeth. Was one of the players that got in at -2 alongside of Grayson Sigg. And to this point of the golf tournament, he's gaining 4.6 strokes around the green. Oh my God. All right, guys, I'm just going to say right now, he's out of the player pool. And this is going to get uploaded as soon as we get off of here. I'm not playing somebody that gained 4.6 strokes around the green. It's that simple to me, right? So, as soon as we saw that, he's to get out of the pool. Let's see. So Patrick says any wave advantage, softer greens. So no waves today. Good thing to point out. They're going to be going off in threesomes off of both holes number 1 and hole number 10. So there's not going to be any sort of wave advantage to go off of. And if anything, it looks like the winds are going to be relatively flat all day. The greens could be more receptive for the guys going off early, but they're going off in about a 2.5 hour span. So it's not like it would be that huge an advantage, right? So maybe for an hour and a half, 2 hours, the guys that are in the middle of the pack are going to have an advantage because they're going off first. But I don't think it's enough to play, Patrick. Good question. That's typically, one of our staples here on the channel. Not so much for this slate, though. Let's hop over to prize picks now. So we've gone through the showdown board. If you still have any showdown questions, feel free to go ahead and toss them down in chat. We'll get them answered for you. But let's go through this prize picks board, which is kind of annoying. Every prop that I've taken once again got bumped. So again, I'm going to call out the prize picks lines makers for being bitch made, for not standing behind their props whatsoever, because I ended up putting stuff out there for strokes. The whole board was at 67.5 strokes. So I took Stuart Sink and I went over here and did they take the other one off the board? No, they didn't. Chez is still up there. And I took him over at 67.5 strokes. Within 10 minutes, they'd be putting out my picks at 2 a.m. last night. They bumped these. At 2 a.m., they're doing bumps prize picks. I mean, that seems outrageous to me. And over here with fairways hit, I had Harris English and Montgomery under fairways hit. Unfortunately, they went from 8 down to 7.5. So I wouldn't recommend that. But we could still use that same sort of idea to make other picks here. So the reasoning behind the two picks here with fairways is the average yesterday was 7.3 fairways. So when you're looking at the board here, it looks like everyone's super low, right? There's 14 fairways. You're telling me they can't hit just over 50%, right? Well, with the firm and fast conditions we have out there, with some of these drivers like a JT Poston being well below average in terms of your accuracy, I still think there's quite a bit of value out there. So a Poston's like the first one that really stands out to me. He's not an accurate driver. Let's see. Actually, I can bring up his whatever. I won't bring up his fairway percentage rate. Actually, I will. Let's bring up his fairway percentage just to give you an exact number here. Taylor Montgomery, by the way, has a 59.1% fairway rate, and what's his name? Harris English has a 59.7% fairway rate. So that was the idea with those two. But let me give you JT Poston's here 1 second. So let me log into my database, figure out what we're doing here. So JT Poston driving accuracy is 60% on the dot. So a little bit higher than an English, a little bit higher than a Taylor Montgomery. So that's why we were waiting to get to that sort of play. But it's still going to be a huge plus EV play when the average is 7.3. So when the average is 7.3 fairways and the PGA Tour average on tours like closer to 8.5 fairways, that's a 1.2 fairway difference, right? So from like what you see on your average PGA Tour course to what you're seeing this week around Waialae. And then when you consider that somebody's a 60% average on like your PGA Tour average course, you have to adjust that down. So even though he's a 60% driver at most courses, around Waialae, he projects for closer to a 50 or even like a 48% fairway rate, which of course is under 7.5 fairways. It's not quite as large an edge as what you have here with the Harris English and Montgomery ones, because they have a lower fairway percentage and they were at 8 fairways. So you were getting a lot of that push equity in your back pocket. So I guess it's worth noting that I would still prefer the Harris English and Montgomery fairway lines to this JT Poston one. But if you were looking for a third one, you could go in that direction. Just obviously, if you got them at 8 fairways, you're going to feel a lot better about these two picks than taking them at 7.5, because now you don't have that push equity. But all should still be pretty decent hit rates there. These elite tier guys at 8.5, you could consider fading, but it wouldn't surprise me if a Brian Harman or Corey Connors went out there and had a really good day. Oh, I don't have my screen sharing. Sorry about that, boys. I thought I had the prize picks board up, but essentially what I was saying is, I still like the English and Montgomery. I still like this JT Poston under. I wish they were at 8. I wish that they hadn't been bumped down, but they're all still plays that lean on the under. Over here in greens regulation, the average was right around 13 greens for Friday. On Thursday, it was a little bit lower than that. It was closer to like 12.9. So you're going to see a similar type of average, but the players here on the board are better iron players than your average bunch in the field. They're like your 55th, 60th percentile sort of players out there. So I think the projections make sense. I mean, it's not the best board, to be honest. A lot of the guys at 13.5, that's pretty much right where I'd project them. There's a few guys I might lean slightly over on here at 13. So like an Adam Scott, I would slightly be leaning on an over. Same thing with Tom Hoge. Both of them are by far the best iron players there at 13.5. And then at 14 greens, I wouldn't touch anybody for an over. I mean, to get to 15 greens, to only have 3 to work with to hit an over is tough. But especially when we have these firm and fast greens. They're running a lot faster this year than what we've seen in years past. And it hasn't rained over the last 2 days. That's just only going to continue going forward. I probably fade the greens regulation board. I probably just don't touch it to begin with. Like I said, I would lean on the over on an Adam Scott. I would lean on the over on a Tom Hoge here, but they're not my favorite plays by any means. Let's go over here to strokes. So I know before I talked about a few picks that got bumped, but in general, guys, this whole strokes board is priced too low. So you could take anybody on this board outside of maybe a few players that like a Corey Connors, I probably wouldn't be fading. I probably wouldn't fade like an Adam Scott, a Tom Hoge. I probably wouldn't even fade a Brian Harman. But a lot of the other guys on here, like a Matt Kuchar, a JJ Spawn comes to mind. I mean, even a Chris Kirk that's up there in first place, 2.5 strokes is too much. The scoring average, I'll remind you guys, was 0.8 under par here on Friday. And though you're going to have some of the lower tier players cut out, which will raise this to at least like a stroke under par, maybe 1.2 strokes under par, you're not going to see a 2.5 under par average. And a lot of the guys down here towards the bottom of the board are slightly better than average players, right? Like Stuart Sink, I would say, is like a pure average player in this field. Same thing with Ches Reavie. That's why I jumped on their overs. They're at 67.5. But like a Kirk, a Poston, a JJ Spawn, like these sort of guys aren't that much better than your average player in this field. So you can consider taking fades on that department. Over here for birdies are better. A few of the guys at 5 birdies, I wouldn't mind taking an under on. They had Tom Hoagie at 5 birdies. They bumped him down to 4.5. That was something that you could have taken. But, actually, they bumped a bunch of them down from 5 down to 4.5. They had Lee at 5 at one point. They always had Adam Scott at 5. That makes sense. But I believe they also had Cameron Davis at 5 birdies, and now he's down to 4.5. So, I don't know. Like I said, they're bump picks today, right? They're taking any picks out there that people are playing and just bumping them, which is getting beyond frustrating. It's not even just me that's frustrated. I know Tour Junkies out there does a lot of their prize picks content. They're getting frustrated with this whole process. Something's got to change, or else people like myself are going to stop doing content for prize picks because they're making it pointless. So hopefully they get the idea at some point. But yeah, this strokes board, this birdie or better board, I guess I would probably stick to the strokes fades. For birdie or better now, truth be told, like I don't hate overs on like Cam Davis now. Like they bumped him from 5 down to 4.5, and he's one of the higher birdie percentage players in the field. Like I wouldn't mind trying to hit back at them now that they've actually bumped it down. A Lee, same thing. He made 4 birdies yesterday after missing all of those short putts. Like if they're going to bump them into our favor, I may actually start to take some of these overs. In fact, after I get off stream here, there's a good chance I add some of these to my card. Like even a Tom Hoagie at 4.5 birdies now. Yeah, there's some stuff here to consider now. If you guys are out there, these 3 for birdies or better are very likely to get added to my poll, added to my Patreon down there. And yeah, probably don't like the Tom Hoagie greens regulation one quite as much anymore. Yeah, I'd probably stick to these 3. These 3 props right here are pretty damn solid. I like them quite a bit. And if you wanted to make sure that you're getting the full payout, right, to try and get rid of that multiplier, then add one of these guys in here, right? Maybe it's a Harris English. You take his under on fairways. Montgomery, you go over. Actually, birdie or better matchup. There's actually one I like quite a bit on here. The birdie or better matchup that I'm taking is this Chris Kirk under. So I know he's in first place. A lot of you box score watchers are probably like, Chris Kirk under? What do you mean? I'm taking the Chris Kirk over for my matchup today. Well, a few things, okay? So if you're new to matchups, first of all, they're volatile, okay? I'll say that. But second of all, you're talking about the guy in first place versus a guy that hardly made the cut. One of them is going to be trying a lot harder to make birdies than the other. One of them is just going to be trying to save their hat, right? Chris Kirk out there in first place, he has no incentive to go out there and try and shoot like 7, 8 under par. He's going to be trying to make par on a lot of the difficult holes, whereas Kurt Kitayama, even on hole 13, which is a 500-yard par 4, he's going to be taking aim at that pin. I mean, he's -2. He has nothing to lose at this point. He's dead for last right now after the cut line. He's got to work his way up the board. So I always want the player that's incentivized to go out there and be as aggressive as hell, trying to make as many birdies as humanly possible. And I try to fade the guys that are in first place a lot of times because they're hyper conservative, right? They're not going to put their entire week on the line for a hero shot, unlike somebody like a Kurt Kitayama. So this card right here, honestly, because these got bumped down from, I guess, other people taking their unders on the industry, I actually like their overs a whole lot now. Like they're the high birdie percentage players that fit this golf course. So this sort of card right here, guys, even a power play, honestly. I mean, you could go with the flex play. It's probably the safer way to go about this. This sort of card is extremely intriguing to me. But that is all I've got here for the stream. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Make sure to hit that like button before hopping on out of here. And let's go ahead and make some cash today, whether it's on Showdown, whether it's for DFS. You know, moving day tends to be a more exciting one. And we get some primetime golf as well. So looking forward to it. Best of luck, whether you're playing there on Draftkings or on Prize Picks. And let's get some cash, right? Like I said, a GPP. I would love for one of us to take it down. Go ahead and send me a screenshot on Twitter if you guys end up taking anything down. And send me all those winning slips later on Prize Picks as well. Best of luck, and I'll catch you guys for next time.